think we're live.
We're on.
Hey everybody,
Whoa.
Welcome to IDEO U office hours. We're broadcasting live from the IDEO San Francisco studio. And it's in the afternoon here, so it might be in the morning or afternoon wherever you are. So thanks for joining us. We are in our San Francisco shop, which is one of our favorite places, one of my favorite places, because this is where teams come and they build and they prototype and they test. And they have magic. They build magic. So
the magic happens here.
There's all sorts of tools in here. We do a lot of woodworking building or building with different materials. The power tools. And there's prototyping stations in the back behind us. And we also we have Em over here, your community guide for the course. And she's going to be with us today, guiding us, continuing to guide us as we go through office hours. Cool. So we're focused on insights and seeing with new eyes and doing that to build and design new things in the world, which is why we wanted to be in the shop today. And I'm Katie Alba, and I'm a design researcher here at IDEO. Worked on all sorts of things from food to education to energy products, and excited to be here. And then we have Dan.
Hi, so my name is Dan Perkel. I'm a design researcher here at IDEO as well, and help guide teams through the research process that you are all learning as part of this incredible course experience.
So we're really excited that everyone is joining us. It looks like we have a few folks, so people might be trickling in. So as we get started, there's a few things to know about today's office hours. Is submitting your live questions, because we're really excited to hear the questions you have and have a conversation with you and with Dan and myself about what you're learning and the questions you have, and we'll do our best to answer and share stories. So we have, if you see on your screen, you'll see on the top right a set of squares. If you click on that, you'll then see a button for Q&A, and that's where you can submit your questions live to us, and we'll be reading those because we're looking at the screen, and Em will be helping us to get your questions answered. So one more time is top right, look for the boxes, and then hit Q&A.
Looks like people are starting to join. Welcome to George from Innsbruck, Austria, which sounds like a place I'd rather be right now than in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Nice.
Welcome. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. If not, then I apologize.
You can also submit questions to us on Twitter. So just simply hit us up on Twitter at IDEO U, and we'll get your questions there as well. Great. So we'd love to know who else is here as people trickle in. In the Q&A, just let us know your name, the city and country that you're in, and also like what industry you're working in or design challenge that you're working on right now. It would be great sense to know who's with us in the conversation.
So who's
Great. So cool. We'll just start off and kick off.
Yeah. Do you want to start? Or do you want to wait a little longer for people to join? I remember last time. Yeah, we can kick it off.
Yeah, we'll kick off. We'll start going. Great. Okay, so we have the first question from George. Hope we're saying your name right, George. How many people do you observe at a minimum to get significant results? Great question. We get this question a lot.
Yeah.
A lot from clients, from as a team, we talk about this. And what we really think about is the engagement of the project, so the challenge that we're solving, and the constraints we have around time, and the constraints we have around getting to different markets. And so in my experience with qualitative, with going out and meeting people and spending time with people, the quality of that interaction is so valuable for the team and for our clients who are working with us to get a real sense of who these people are and get to know them. And so we do focus on quality of those interactions rather than quantity. And so we typically interviewing anywhere from 6 to 10 to potentially 12 to 15 people is kind of the range, depending on the scope of the project, the size of the team, and exposure to different markets and getting different segments. But we really focus on a smaller number and spending quality time with them.
Yeah, and just to add something there, I would say like if you're doing a project that's really less exploratory, but it's more like focused on feedback around a particular design, for example, there's kind of a rule of thumb that you can probably find or identify 80% of the problems with like 5 to 8 people. So it wouldn't make sense to go off and recruit and talk to like 50 people if you have a lot of confidence that after 5 there's a huge diminishing return. So you kind of have to see, you got to think about this like what you're trying to accomplish with each thing. So for example, on a project that we did for an automotive company, we would do rounds and cycles of feedback, and each cycle of feedback we would do roughly 5 to 8 people, and we kind of mixed and matched people who we had talked to previously with people who were new, and we just kind of looped them into the system. And we found that was really enough for our designers and for our team to get enough insights to like move on to the next iteration. Now, another thing that I see Katie drawing this curve. Yes. I'm guessing why. So like.
Well, yeah, no, Dan, you think of, we also look at like the spread of users and people that individuals that we want to talk to, and thinking about the characteristics of the people we're talking to, and making sure that we have the representative of you've seen this in extremes of extreme users that we want to spend time with.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think hopefully that answers the question. But please ask follow-up questions, and then we'll get to it. We'll get to the next follow-up question on that when we come back around. 7 more people are starting to join us. We have Caesar in Richmond, Virginia. Welcome, Caesar. I saw, who else we have, Em?
We have Natalie from Ukraine.
Late at night there.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us here. A question from Christian, I think. What are some of the challenges we've encountered during interviewing? Oh, everybody has like, it's almost like you have like a rites of passage, like the interview war stories, and those are almost every qualitative researcher or anybody who's interview studies has their own. There's probably a few kinds of challenges. There's like extreme challenges, like here's a particular moment that was a challenge, or there's like the everyday kind of challenges. Maybe we'll give a couple of both, a couple examples. I mean, so for example, I had an interview where we had set everything up, and for some reason the participant thought that the interview was a half an hour later than it was. So we showed up, we were supposed to interview a woman and her mom at the same time. We drove a couple hours outside of San Francisco. We got there. The daughter wasn't there yet. She thought the interview was half an hour later. The mom was there. She wasn't quite ready, and she wasn't the person we were primarily working with. And she was really accommodating and didn't mind, but then she had 2 dogs and needed to go for a walk, and one of them escaped. And we're out, in the middle of this in this field, chasing this dog around, trying to get this dog to get back into the house before we can even start the interview.
Was it a pet project?
It was not a pet project. It was a project. But we kind of did. We turned that into an opportunity. I was able to actually get the dog to like come back, and I didn't really wrestle the dog, but I got the dog in, and then the mom was really grateful. So then the daughter showed up, and it was like, yeah, we both a little trust, like, oh, great, like these guys aren't just interviewing me, they're actually helpful, which was nice.
Yeah, that kind of sets the right tone.
I mean, that's like an extreme challenge, and you're going to have those challenges. But the everyday challenges are probably the ones that you've started to talk about. Like, I'm imagining the kinds of things that you're starting to learn in the Insights for Innovation class. Like, sometimes interviews just don't go well. Sometimes the person is not offering up a lot, or they don't have a lot to say, or it doesn't feel like you do. So I have 2 tricks for that, and one of the ways is like if they're not offering up, then I try to almost ask them about anything. Like I'll just look around their house and just start a conversation about anything. So I try to find something that maybe there's something that I'm talking about that for whatever reason, even though I think that's the thing that should matter. So I have my interview guide, and it's like these 3 topic areas. Maybe the thing that really matters is something else. And so I try to look around their homes, or, take something else that's right in front of me and just have a conversation about that. And hopefully that entry point of something that's important to them could be the thing that actually becomes more important to us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one trick there.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I thought of is, which we didn't go too deeply into in the course, is that we do a recruiting and screening process. And part of that is to ask questions and have a conversation on the phone and get their thoughts around specific kind of deeper questions, and just seeing how that rapport is over the phone before we meet in person. And that's really helpful to, we often travel very far to meet people, and so making sure that conditions are set in place and their expectations are met. One time I was doing an interview in a rural part of India, and we were testing really affordable solar products for households who use primarily candles or kerosene. And we were really trying to get a sense of how the product is being used and what use cases we can improve, and also like how to position the product. And so we met with families in different villages, and a family that I met with, they were lovely. They were very welcoming. They welcomed us in, which was very generous of them. And we sat down with the husband and started talking about the product and how they found out about it, how they used it, all of these specifics. And I realized he didn't really actually know the details of. He couldn't be really specific yet about how the product was used at the home in different scenarios. But he was sort of the primary voice of the family, and his wife was sitting sort of away from the group and doing sort of housework. And I wondered if she had a lot of insight, although the conversation was primarily with the husband. And so just respecting like cultural differences, if there were any, and being sensitive to that. And so we really shifted the conversation to show us, which we talked about in the course. It's like, can you show us the different ways it's being used? Can you kind of emulate and just give us examples? And that's when he passed the products and the prototypes to his wife. And she really came into the conversation, and she really was sort of the one who was really just telling us. And so I wanted to have a conversation with her, but I wanted to set it up in a way that felt welcoming. And that just gesture of showing us was the way we found a way to do that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's see, people who have been joining us since we started. We have Colette from Charlottesville, Virginia. We have Turkey, I think is hopefully how you pronounce your name, from the Netherlands. An offshore structures research engineer. That is awesome. I love the idea of bringing design research and design insights to those kinds of, to that kind of design process. Christian from El Paso, Texas is also with us. Welcome, Christian. And we have more questions filtering in, so why don't we get to the next one? So from Nazlikan, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. If I'm not, I apologize. From Turkey, but now living in New York City. Yes, have you ever experienced a client who doesn't believe in design research? And how do you convince them of the importance? Wow, that is an excellent question, and I think yes is the short answer to the first part. We certainly have people who, before they're even really clients of ours, definitely question us about the process and the methods. But then, even when somebody's bought into it, and our core teams, working with teams from different companies, there's often somebody who they don't necessarily not believe, but they have doubts, and they're valid doubts. They're good doubts. Yeah. And so, I guess answering the second part of your question may depend on what those doubts really are. But let's say it's just like they don't understand the value of really talking to somebody. So something people will often say is, well, I'm designing for the future, so how does it help me to talk to somebody in the present, right? That's a common doubt, like that, and I don't know if that's one you've heard, but that's a clear like one. Definitely. So, one of the things I try to talk about is say, I'm not, like, nobody here is under the illusion that this person is going to understand what it is that they need in the future, but by exposing our whole design teams and our clients to this person's life, and not just that person then, so it's that person plus then 12 others, or maybe over the course of the project, it's these little cohorts of people. We start to get a much richer picture of what a realistic, kind of a realistic looking future might kind of look like, as opposed to, you probably all seen those, it's easy to imagine kind of scenarios that don't have, where you're trying to design your thing and you want to put it into like a real world context, and often like futuristic visions overlook some of the nitty-gritty details of what a real-world context might be. But we try to show our clients that by being in people's homes, you start to see things that they never would have thought of otherwise. And by being able to just observe their environments, not just hear what they say, you start to learn things you wouldn't have otherwise. And we just make that case through past examples like this. We tell stories. That's one piece. That's to overcome that particular doubt.
Yeah, and we really we do design research with our teams here at IDEO, and then also with our clients.
Yeah.
Because we love that everyone's kind of involved in that process, and we notice a lot of our clients want to be spending more time with their customers or potential customers, and even if it's not the whole time, those moments really stick with them and the stories they tell. Because data, and we do combine data with that in surveys, but how can we bring the data to life with real human stories that really move people to want to change and impact people's lives? And so that becomes a powerful part of the design research process.
Yeah, and if we're talking about comparing design research to not really even talking to customers at all, then I think one of the real kind of values of it is it's a great way to test teams' assumptions. So to get everybody's assumptions and hypotheses on the table, whether it's our clients or our own internal teams, and then go out and say, you know, we have to make sure we're kind of rethinking these or testing these. And so whether it's talking about collecting quantitative data or qualitative data, we want to go out and do something. We want to get out into the real world. So a good example for that for me is that there was a project where we all thought we understood the domain really well. You know, it had to do with TV, and we all thought we understand television. You know, our clients were in the television business. They all understand television. All of us in the team were all television consumers. But we used an exercise to get all of our hypotheses and assumptions on the table, and realized how many differences there were. But even on our client team, they actually didn't even see television the same way, despite the fact they worked together every day over the course of years. So then it was very clear as to, like, well, let's go in with our eyes wide open into a new, like, making something that's really familiar, making it strange. That's kind of a refrain from a lot of design research. So that's a.
I love that part of the project when we put up a board and we all kind of put up all of our assumptions.
Yeah.
And then start from there and put those aside.
Yeah.
That's a great way to start off.
So let's see. Denise from Minnesota has joined us in the last few minutes. Katie, do you want to walk through how to ask a question? We love getting these questions.
So for those of you who just joined or joined recently, we're taking questions live on Twitter, so at IDEO U. But also, if you go to the top right of your screen, you'll see these boxes. And then if you click on that, you'll see a Q&A box. And if you just click on that, you can input your question directly into the platform, and we'll answer them.
Yeah. So we have a question on Twitter. So Colette is on Twitter, and she asked a great question. Oh, what's nice about Twitter, she actually asked the question 6 hours ago and knew we were gonna be here to answer it. So, you know, she wanted to know, after sharing insights, in what ways do you participate in the design and implementation process? So I assume by you she meant design researchers. So I don't know if you want, why not?
Yeah, in a variety of ways. So, for example, a lot of the exploratory research is to surface an opportunity area. And like in the course, we talk about, like, what is the thing that you're really driven to design and solve for people? And that type of motivation drives the team and drives the client. So that's really a part of the exploration process. But then it's about, like, taking ideas out and iterating and testing them. So going back out to people, either in interviews or kind of group sessions. We call them wine and dines, where we have people come here and have dinner and kind of share ideas. But we want to put more ideas in front of them that are a little bit more refined, and co-create with them and see what we can iterate on and create together. So that's another part of the process is taking those opportunities, designing for them, and co-creating with people.
Mm. Yeah, and I would also add that I think that, you know, this is a great question that really gets on is the organization that you're working with really well set up for a design research process. So we firmly believe that, at least for the work that we want to do, it doesn't really help to have a researcher or even two researchers go out, kind of collect a bunch of stuff, synthesize it independently, and then throw it over the wall to some designers, like our interaction designers. We believe that everybody is involved. So our whole design team is involved in research, including clients, and then our whole design team, including the researchers, are involved in the design work. And we're involved to help really, like, when it comes to kind of guiding synthesis and making sure that we're all kind of connecting the dots and kind of reaching a consensus understanding of what the problem is and what the solutions could be, as well as holding together the through lines from the research and the narratives to make sure that where we end up, like let's say at the end of a project, really seems to fit the things that we found really important in the research. And that sounds obvious, but it's really easy as you get into more of a design headspace to kind of like go in different directions and put things on paper that don't really match what we saw. I mean, it's kind of natural. It just happens. So as design researchers, we're involved in making sure that the story of the research and the story of the people really holds true and holds together.
Yeah, I mean, one project I worked on was for, we were designing a new school model for a charter school in the Northeast area of the US. And we had spent a lot of time with students, families, teachers, faculty to understand the needs of the community and to understand challenges and goals they had for learning and preparing students for college, first generation students for college. And so, so we spent time with them. We did homestays. We spent time in the classroom, and then we had a lot of design workshops where we brought ideas back to the community and had them sketch with us and had them design with us. But also at the end of the project, it was really about telling the story of the student's journey through this new school. Like, what does that really look like? Not just from a scheduling perspective, but from a student. Like, how does a student feel about how they're learning? What do we want them? What do we hope that they feel because of this design about their learning experience? And that was something that was really important to the team because we wanted students to really be engaged and be excited about this new way of learning, and the faculty to also see the value. So that story arc is a big part of it.
That's great. More questions. This is great. We are getting so many questions. Let's see. We have one from Denise in Minnesota. And the question is, observation is such an important part of uncovering deeper insights. So do we have any examples of times when we have observed, when what we've observed let us know that an interviewee wasn't answering questions with full truth or the whole story? How do we use that insight? That is a great question.
I mean, you can tell when people are holding back.
Yeah.
And I definitely take it upon myself as the interviewer to help them to tell their stories. And they might not be intentionally holding back.
Right.
It's just people want to express things in different ways. So when I feel that someone has more to say, I try to think of another way to help them to tell their story. And so we do things. We do ask them, instead of just asking like what happened, what was the experience, we might ask them to like select words from cards that represent how they felt during that experience, and to talk about each of those feelings or emotions. So we might have a set of cards with different emotions and have them talk about the emotions they feel. So just having different ways in your back pocket for people to respond rather than just direct conversation helps people to be prompted.
Yeah, I for whatever reason I'm having difficulty coming up with a great story, but I can think of it. But I in general, I think there's two things that I think about. One is, like, going back to the question, I kind of assume that we're never going to get the full story. I walk into an interview just kind of having that sense that we're going to get a story, and it's the story they want to tell us in this moment. But this is another good reason to be actually in somebody, like with somebody or in a place that's familiar to them or it's part of their world, because you can start to fill in the gaps or ask them about things that fill in the gaps. So, for example, kind of back to that situation with the interviewee with her mom and her daughter in the interview, like they were living in a very small apartment and there was stuff just everywhere and piles of boxes. And they kind of apologized for it at the beginning because people tend to be very, they're kind of shy about to let people into their homes. They're kind of pretty apologetic. We didn't really probe on what that was all about, but it became clear, like as we got more comfortable, that and we want to understand that this mom and their daughter, their relationship and how it affected their TV watching and where they watch TV. And we started to learn more about things in their home that reflected a current situation. Like they had to move. The reason they were they were evicted from an apartment before and why. And so these are all the things that kind of, again, they might have held back if we just asked them that question, but then we used our observation skills and to try to combine it with the topic that we were talking about just to bring all those things together. I'm not sure if that exactly answers your question, but it is a way of just kind of just knowing you're never going to get the full picture unless you start to look, like you're really like using those real like observation skills to look for a more full picture than you're ever going to have. Which kind of relates to the next question, I guess. So from Natalie. Natalie, I'm not sure where you are, but welcome. And the question is, does observation become a lifestyle with time? And are there tricks to provoke people to share their stories? Does observation become a lifestyle? I think like anything, it takes practice. And the more you practice it, the more you see. So maybe if that's what you're asking and the answer is yes. I don't know,
Yeah.
Katie, what do you think? Is that?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if you enjoy doing it, because I do,
Yeah.
then it's just something that it's fun, whether you're traveling or just in your own home environment. So I guess so. I guess it becomes something that becomes a habit.
Yeah, and the tricks, I think we've already mentioned a few, like focus on things that, at least, well, at the beginning of an interview, really focus on like understanding who they are as a person and less about the kind of like, try not to think about, I would say try not to think about an interview as an exercise in extracting information. That's often how people want to think about it because you have 2 hours or you have an hour and you need to learn certain things. But if you kind of leave yourself open to like understanding who this person is and what they're about, one, they're going to like share with you a lot more. And two, you suddenly realize that, like I said before, the thing that you think you want to know about maybe is less important than what you learn. Like, for example, the story with this woman and her daughter, it became really important how they divided up their space and where they watched TV to understand the backdrop of their personal experience. So we wouldn't have known that just going in. We didn't have that as a question exactly, but we just left ourselves really open to those experiences.
I think one of the tricks, maybe one trick is, one trick I have is a place to capture. Because if you are if you have something to capture observations, then it sort of becomes part of your daily psyche, whether that's photos or when appropriate, or like a notebook, and it kind of, you build on that and you practice observation. So if you have a mechanism to do that.
Yeah, trick for practicing, absolutely. Sorry, I was thinking about a different sentence, but yeah, that's a great idea. Definitely having it. It's like having a sketchbook. You have your own notebook and you practice seeing things.
I mean, a lot of different researchers also have something that they're observing specifically in different places. Whether it's ways people carry objects and kind of doing that in many different contexts, and it becomes like a game, I think.
Yes, that's funny. Like I Spy.
Yeah.
It's a game you played when you were 2 years old. You just keep playing it over and over again. We have another question, another Twitter question from Margaret. So Margaret asks, I've had to do a couple of telephone interviews for class. Do you also opt for those when all else fails? I think it's yes. In fact, I just got off the phone with somebody before doing these office hours. We did a phone interview with somebody who was a professional living in Florida. We had to learn from somebody in that kind of role, and I think it would have been great to meet that person in person and see where they work. But we really just needed to have a conversation about their job and get some feedback on some ideas. And given where we're at in the project, like the phone call worked great. It's not always a when all else fails scenario. I mean, certainly there could be reasons to do a lot of more remote research than to do in-person research. Some people really don't want to invite you into their homes, but that doesn't mean they aren't somebody who you couldn't learn a lot from. So you have to kind of have that judgment call as to like, well, do we shut down this avenue of exploration because they don't like meetings to you face to face, or could there be other angles? So a good example is that I did a bunch of research with teenagers before even coming to IDEO, and one of the most important media for research turned out to be instant messenger, because there were these teenagers. For example, this woman, this first time I met her, she was 15 at the time. Her mom, like, she was interested, but her mom kind of signed her up because she was like, my daughter is really shy and I want her to practice, right? Which is the worst thing you can probably say in front of a shy teenager. So we met, and she didn't say a word to me, but I was very certain that she actually wanted to do it. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone through with it, but she did want to do it, and I got the sense. So we agreed to like meet up on I think at the time we used AIM probably. I don't even know if AOL Instant Messenger is still something anybody uses, but we used AIM, and I mean, we like talked for like 4 hours. You know, I think her mom was in the living room watching TV, and we just chatted about like everything she was doing at school, about her artwork, and she was multitasking, doing other stuff at the same time. But I was like becoming part of that reality for her, which is a very unshy, chatty, interesting person using this particular medium. So
That's very cool.
that was a really useful way to think about.
Yeah.
Wow, that was actually a way better interview than it would have been in person. I think in person might have been an awful interview.
Yeah. No, but that's such a good point. Is like, what medium does the person you want to talk to use the most comfortable with?
Yeah.
And how can you use that? We wanted to meet a lot with this whole families. We're doing a new home computing device project, and we wanted to kind of understand their experience over a long period of time, so about a month. And we wanted to check in with them, and so we basically used a blog, and so set up questions for them and sort of ping them each week with questions, and then also allowed them to kind of respond on their own time. And this was great because we got response from their 10-year-old, response from the dad, we got a response from the grandma, and so everyone sort of was like on the blog and sharing with us their different experiences, and we were able to keep up and communicate with them throughout the week. And so we concluded with a phone call, and that was great because we had already been like communicating with them through the blog, and so a phone call felt great. I mean, it was a Skype call, so that felt comfortable by then. So there's different ways to make the phones or Skype really more comfortable for folks.
It's a great story. Cool. So people are more questions are coming. Let's see, where should we go first?
So we have one question from Nazlakan, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. It's a beautiful name. Is it better for a user not to know why they are being interviewed? How much of a project do you reveal to your users before interviewing?
Well, I can jump in. I don't know if you want to. So I'll start with the second part first. We tend to reveal as much of a project in general. Like, we want them to know why we're interviewing them. That's kind of like a baseline, typically. So with that in mind, we often will reveal enough where they understand from like an ethical point of view, will understand, hey, here's why you guys are in my house, and here's what we're trying to get out of this. And so they don't feel blindsided or they're like caught in any particular way. But we don't want to necessarily overwhelm them with information at the beginning, because that isn't typically very helpful. So we'll tell them what the project's generally about. And then we always know, this happens every project I'm in, they've talked to somebody at IDEO about this project. They've been kind of screened. They spent 10 minutes in a conversation. We'll show up and they're like, I don't really get why you're here, but they want to do it anyway. So we definitely have to explain it. So we try to explain as much as we need to. Is it better for a user not to know why they're being interviewed? I think our default is, the answer to that is no, probably. I'm going to speak for myself, but it's probably better for them to know why, because often then they'll actually steer you in a really productive direction. Like they can help you what it is you need to know about their lives that might make sense for what you're trying to learn. I could imagine particular situations, especially if they're more experimental, if they feel like experiments, where you don't want to tell the full picture, at least at the beginning. But then I would argue, at least, and everybody has, that there's different research ethics, but it's probably the right thing to do afterwards to tell them what that was all about. So have you ever even been like in a laboratory-based experiment, which is not what we're talking about, but there are a lot of lab experiments which really require you not to, for the experiment to be considered valid, they really require you not to know what it's about. Even in those situations, the research teams will always tell you afterwards what the experiment was about, because they have an ethical duty to do so. So to me, if that is even more obligation on us having being in the situation that we're in. So I don't know. That's just it's a pretty direct answer. It's not like an it depends answer, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have more nuance, Katie? Or?
Well, I was just thinking that we're trying to design new solutions for specific need areas or problems, and so it's helpful when people are aware of like why we're talking to them, and that experience is kind of top of mind for them to share. So in all of my projects, we've always been upfront and transparent with why we're here, why these strangers are here, and what we're hoping to learn from someone like you with your particular expertise.
Hope that answered that. But if you have more details you want to share with us about your project and what you're getting at, feel free to, feel free to ask. Okay. So the next question. Yeah, we're looking at all these questions. I want to make sure we are as fair as possible in getting them answered. We have a great question from Jack on Twitter. Might have already been asked. How do you push beyond your innate biases during your research? That's an excellent question.
I mean, one thing that we've been talking about recently here as a community is in the IDEO studio in the Bay Area is to sort of document and catalog what's the demographic of the designers here at IDEO, and what are the biases that come out of that demographic.
Yeah. And
just to be aware of it, but be aware of the population that we represent here when we go into projects, and being aware of, are we within the same age range? We're all living in a city? Like what are those common characteristics that we need to be aware of when we're going out and to do research? So that's one thing that we've been talking a lot about actually very recently.
Yeah, there's different kinds of biases. So that's a great example. Like we just have to be, I think for us, like there's a story I told earlier, and maybe you weren't on, or maybe the relationship wasn't clear, but certainly getting our biases and assumptions and hypotheses on the table and using those as kind of like the research instrument is really like useful. Like using that as like the mechanism for how you're going to learn. And this is where team-based research is really good. Like having other people like surface for you what your biases might be based on what you're hearing, or we try to be very explicit, I think, as best we can what our biases could be. And that'll happen often. And just as we describe ourselves as being very design driven, and we kind of build to think. And by taking initial stabs at design before we even necessarily learn anything, like those designs that we put down on a piece of paper often reveal some of those biases and what they are. So we all try to do design together. Those designs can lead to biases. But I think if your question is getting at like issues of racial biases, economic biases, all that stuff, I mean, it's incredibly important to be really cognizant of. And the best way to do it, I think, is to really like think through it, or have somebody else challenge you in the early part of the project.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do that a lot by putting things in front of people and hearing what they think about it. It's less about we may love an idea, but it doesn't really matter. So just trying to put ideas and put designs in front of the people who will be using it, and giving their opportunity to build and create it, because that's really more valuable to us than us sitting in a room doing it.
Yeah, and it's really, it requires a very questioning mindset. It's like often people want to go into research trying to validate their ideas, and maybe a better approach could be to go into a project trying to invalidate your ideas. And then, it's kind of like this kind of is borrowed from, again, experimental methods. But if you try to invalidate your ideas and you realize that your attempt to invalidate is such a disaster, then maybe you were actually thinking in the right direction. So that's another little trick to get your biases out, is to think about all the things that you might be completely wrong about, and therefore that's why you got to put something in front of somebody. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. So Natalie asked us, how do you find people to participate in focus groups?
This kind of gets to the broader question of recruiting in general. And you were starting to talk about that earlier. So at IDEO, we are very lucky to have an internal recruiting team anchored by some folks who are just awesome at helping us. But we also do a fair share of that ourselves. There's a lot of different methods. I think there was a question somewhere about recruiting experts that I saw earlier, so maybe this kind of answers that as well. I mean, we reach out to our networks. We figure out if there's places online where it really makes sense, if there are like niche community groups, or if it makes sense to post recruit stuff through social media, or is there a way to reach out to people through Twitter or Facebook? It kind of depends on the project as to whether or not we think that's a good means of recruiting somebody, but we may end up doing that, or using our networks.
Yeah, I mean, it always starts with a description, a profile of the types of people we're hoping to talk to. Like the spread of people that we're hoping to talk to, users, but also experts or analogous folks who we would love to have time with and learn from and be inspired by. And so that's a big brainstorm with the team, with the client, of like who are the right people to talk to. And once we kind of narrow that down and prioritize, then we work with our recruiting team to think of like, based on these people, you know, say we're working with chefs, like what is the best medium and venues to kind of go out and reach them and find them. So that's sort of the process in a nutshell. But there's a lot of brainstorming. Even that part is a brainstorming about like the right people. And
just to get into more of the nuts and bolts, I mean, there are actually firms who will help you do that as well. So if you know, I don't know everybody's background. I don't know the background of the person asking this question, but if there are these big firms that if you have, you know, for $1,000, a couple $1,000, if that's part of your budget, you provide them with a screener of what you're looking for, and they can find you those people, and that's like the very like nitty-gritty details of how you might find somebody, but that does work for us sometimes as well.
Yeah, and I'd say like one thing is we do get really specific. Like we really want to talk to you know, a chef who has his restaurant closed down for health inspection, and we want to know what that experience is. And so we think of these really specific type of personalities or situations or people with goals as a team, and we think about, you know, why we want to talk to them. What is it about that experience that they've gone through, or who they are, and how do we reach out to them?
So, should we go top question?
Sure.
Yeah. So from Nazla Khan again, how long do you typically schedule for an interview?
Good question.
Yeah, there is kind of a typical, actually.
Yeah.
Here at least. I mean, it's part of like it kind of like relates to the length of your projects and how much time you give yourselves to do interviews. I mean, there's all these factors add up, but we often do 90 minutes to 2 hours is often a good length of time. So like, you know, a typical interview might be 90 minutes. I was fortunate to have this really interesting experience when I was in the Philippines, though, where we scheduled a 2-hour interview with a woman who was living at home with her mom. Her mom came home and even though she knew this interview was going on, was still a little bit flustered, and we couldn't really tell why. But then she was like, just ignore my mom, you know, like it's like I'm an adult and I can do whatever I want, basically. So we did the interview, but definitely we're kind of wary. And then her mom started asking us some questions, and then her mom said, you know what, you guys should just stay for dinner. And so we stayed for like a 6-hour, it basically turned out to like a 6 or 7 hour interview, you know, where we learned so much more than we would have without it. And we also learned about the kind of cultural experience. We had talked to it, later on we talked to an expert who talked about kind of culture in the Philippines and this, you know, this kind of art he described as of making strangers into more intimate people in your lives. And we realized that we had experienced that moment with this mom, and that actually had an impact on the kinds of technology services that we were thinking about designing for her family. So not only did we learn more about the family, we also had an experience of something which sounded interesting, but was just kind of academic on paper. So in that case, like we wouldn't have scheduled a 6-hour interview, but I mean, I wouldn't shy away from it. I mean, I would, I guess, continue to be open for new experiences, and the design project will probably end up being better. But we do have typicals.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'd say typically 2 hours. I mean, we did a homestay with the family. Homestay not meaning we didn't spend the night, but we were there at 6 a.m. when everyone was getting up until everyone was going to school. And that came much later, after we had sat down with them, sat down with the mom, and had conversations, you know, over coffee. And so that time for us had built up into a time that made sense for our team to spend this amount of time with the family. So just depending on what your goal is, and how the time can start to how you build the relationship in order to create time with families or people.
Yeah, and it can be really powerful if time permitted, if you can build up like repeat relationships with people and you get to know them over time. I mean, it's amazing how much you learn, how much you continue to learn from people. Like, and we had a similar situation where we interviewed somebody for an hour and a half. we went back to them and said, you know, can we hang out? Can we just kind of hang out with you for a day? And she was willing to let us do that. And we spent like 9 hours with her.
Yeah.
And it was really awesome.
Cool. So we have another question from Margaret, and we have about 15 minutes left. So any other questions, let us know. So Margaret asked, does having people show you also work if you are designing a new policy as opposed to a product or device?
We'll show you.
That is a really, really good question. My first reaction to that is how can you make a policy tangible in terms of like making a decision for people to make a decision. So thinking about, we always talk here about like what are our sacrificial concepts. So these are concepts that we put in front of people that we think probably are really wacky, that'll elicit like kind of a strong response. And so just thinking about policy and how can you take a policy that you're thinking about and bring it to life in different forms and see how people react to it, and that would give you insight on how they feel about that, how that policy would affect their lives. It's just one idea, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the question is also about how they would show us.
Oh, yeah.
Which might, I mean, it's interesting. I think it depends. I mean, it really probably depends what I think whether we're designing a policy, a product, you know, or a device, I think having them show us how they like, as opposed to just telling us about things, but showing us how they actually do things in their home or wherever we are. Like maybe we're I'm trying to imagine a situation where we are designing a policy.
Is it more like how like we always when we're with people, we're like, think out loud.
Show us versus tell us.
Show us how think it through your process. How are you making this decision?
There's some kind of interpreting this question.
Yeah.
But I kind of just imagine that, like, let's say you're trying to decide, like, you're helping design new educational policy, and you were interviewing, like, school administrators. There's certainly an incredible amount of room for them to, like, show you all kinds of elements of their day-to-day routines, of their interactions with teachers, or whatever it is that we're trying to get at. That's as much about showing and telling that it really wouldn't matter if we're talking about a policy or a product. But Margaret, if you want to ask a clarifying question to help us understand a bit more what you have in mind, we'd be happy to make sure we take it. That's a great question over there. I don't know if that's the next one you're on.
Okay. Okay, we have a question from Shwetanji. I hope I said your name correctly.
I would have totally butchered that.
Thanks for sharing your question. So I work in software. I work in enterprise software. And a lot of examples that we talk about are around tangible products, service touch points. Could you talk about some project that was a redesign of a software product, your process for insights and methods? Yeah.
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, actually, we are working on a project right now, which is like a learning platform, and we've launched with beta content and a beta experience to get feedback on for a long period of time, almost a couple months. And through that experience, we're sort of like cataloging what we're learning that people love about the functionality of the software and what people are inhibited by, while also looking at, you know, what else is out there and experiences, the signature experiences that we want to come to life. And so thinking about, for us, we really approach this project thinking about what are those signature experiences that we think will really make this software, this platform, very impactful in terms of how people are viewing and consuming content. And so taking those signature experiences back out to people and seeing how they would want to experience it. So getting the feedback from the current beta experience, sketching it and signing it, and then taking it back out to people, and then looking at what is our software options currently in the market and what can we build and how can we bring those signature experiences to life. So we're really focused on designing for those signature moments.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of software design projects, and so I mean, a lot of the same insights and methods actually work for us for both physical products or software products. You just have to think about how to twist them in particular directions. So for example, you know, we were designing software for sales professionals, we realized that it wouldn't be so easy to shadow sales professionals because they had their own, they were trying to get the sale, and anything that you did to get in the way of them getting the sale was going to be intrusive and it'd be kind of a pointless exercise. So we did a lot of remote research where we had them record like right after a meeting. They had a sales call. They went into that meeting. How did it go? And then share that back with us remotely by a video. That was like a really useful exercise with them. I mean, I could imagine doing the same thing with physical products as well, but it was important for thinking about sales software. But we also prototype with software in the same way that we might prototype with a new device. So for example, you might find that like everyday experiences that people use become like things that you can repurpose for prototyping. So if you have a sense that like, hey, being able to communicate with like, let's say we're working with teachers, and you know, if teachers had like an expert in a new chat system which let them link up to any other kind of teacher, like what would they learn from that, or what insights could you get? Well, maybe all those teachers use WhatsApp. So why don't you, or maybe they don't even use WhatsApp, and you're like, you have a bunch of teachers all install WhatsApp on their iPhones or on their Samsungs or whatever it is, and then they can actually prototype that experience through software. So there's actually a lot of opportunity to prototype, to both learn, get insights, and prototype the actual experience using existing software solutions, and then use that to redesign whatever you're thinking about, whatever the project is about. So awesome. I don't know. There's
I remember that.
tons of opportunity there, and we do a lot of it here as well. I guess we have time for two more. That's what we're getting. Like we're getting the two more. So
it's really fast.
I know. Wow, time is flying. From Colette, how do you brainstorm potential immersion experiences?
This is actually really fun. I think it's like one of the easier ones to do, because if you have a diverse team of people, which IDEO, we really design our teams to bring multiple perspectives, someone who's has a graphic design background, an anthropologist, someone who's a magician, whatever. People have like really dream-like experiences that they want to have in the world, and that really motivates them to like, how do I use that experience to one day learn? And so people bring that into the group, into the project, and so you kind of get this opportunity if you're working on a design challenge that's relevant to something you've always wanted to try. Like you can just bring that up and discuss it with the team, and it's like a really fun. It's just a fun way to hear about like the types of experiences that people want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, the only add I have to that, because I agree, it can be really fun, and people usually have a lot of interesting things and ways of thinking about a problem that you don't. One of my tricks is, especially if you're working on your own, which could be the case for many of you, try to like unpack a few of the dimensions of the problem that you're working on. Like, you know, you're like, well, what's hard about the current, I don't know, I'll say education again, but the current education system, and you're like, well, it's a lot of bureaucracy, and teachers are really important, but administrators are looking over them because of something else, or who knows. You start to come up with all these dimensions for yourself, and then you just talk to as many people as you can about the dimensions. So the next time you're hanging out with your friends at a bar, just be like, I mean, I have done this. It's just a conversation topic about like whether you're into politics or whatever it is that you're into, bring it up in the course of a conversation. Like, how do you deal with a situation where like you think you're a really important person in this position, but your boss is overlooking you, like, and that helps me jumpstart a lot of thinking about what the dimensions of a problem might be and what kind of experiences I might want to take my team on or my client on. Some of that work you can do it by yourself too, but it's not really by yourself, obviously, because you're bringing in as many people as you talk to. And if you really have nobody to talk to, then I would say read. Read, watch movies.
YouTube, yeah.
Get inspired by everything that you can around you.
I mean, another way that we think about like mindsets, what are the mindsets that people might be experiencing when they're faced with the challenge you're trying to solve?
Great question.
Everyone has different mindsets. Like some people get frustrated, but they're not angry. Some people are just like angry. Some people are sympathetic, you know, whatever the different mindsets are, and then figure out experience that might help you to understand that mindset.
Yep. Oh, good. It looks like from Margaret that we addressed the question. I'm happy we did. So if anybody else was listening to that answer, it's the question to Margaret. It looks like we were getting at something there, which is we're happy about at least. Thanks, Margaret, for making us feel better. And I guess we have time for one last question, which is, do you have a favorite project you've worked on? What about the worst project ever? Katie.
Oh gosh.
Katie, let me get in my, take some notes here. What is being
Favorite
favorite
project
project?
you've worked on? I mean, the school project that I've shared with talked about a lot in this office hours was one project that I really loved working on. I mean, we were working with families who are just really want to do what it takes to get their children successful and into college. And so we had very motivated people that we were talking to, and really wanted to co-create with us. And so that's always really exciting because they're excited to do that and they want to spend the time. And we really got to empathize with their experience as much as we could just by spending time with them in many different ways, whether it was a homestay or through workshop sessions where we were designing together, and then actually going back to the classroom, spending time with just the parents or just the kids, and getting different perspectives and allowing those perspectives to come through. And it also was one of my favorite projects because it's went into pilot and it's currently in design. So that's exciting as well.
Yeah. So to me, this question is kind of like the question of what's your favorite movie? Like I don't know. It's like, well, if I'm thinking about comedies, I have a soft spot for Better Off Dead, this John Cusack movie from the 80s. And that's, that's we're talking about adventure, it's something else. And I kind of feel that way a lot about projects. Like there's some projects where I loved a particular way we did the research, or I loved a particular, like it was great to go to the Philippines and Indonesia for a certain project and, to meet that woman and her mom and have dinner with her. I mean, that was one of my favorite research experiences. It's funny, it's actually not really one of my favorite projects when I look back on it, but that was one of my favorite research moments. So I don't know what that means. I had a project recently where it was a financial services project, and I absolutely loved the outcomes. I really liked working with the clients. I think the research we did was fine. I don't, as a researcher, I don't look back at that and think, wow, we did amazing research, but it was a great project. I don't know why. I mean, maybe because of the way we interact as a team with the clients. So a lot goes into that for me. And I always, so the second, like going to the second part of the question, the worst project ever,
Yeah.
like I don't know. I don't have no, nothing comes to mind. Like it's so lame. I know. Like you want to be able to like share some juicy details of like really bad projects, but
Yeah.
I tend to find because maybe it's because we're in a good position as being researchers. I don't know how you feel, but as a researcher, I find something interesting in everything, and so everything becomes good enough. Nothing would be worst. Maybe if I had a different position, like maybe if I were just doing interaction design, I'd be like, wow, I just hated designing that. I don't know. I can't speak for interaction designers because I was one a long time ago, but I'm not one now. And I don't know.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Because every project, there's something really strange that you learn that you would never have learned ever with a bunch of people, which is a cool bonding experience.
Let's see. So there are more questions coming in, but we're hitting the 4 o'clock mark. And so I think sadly we have to shut things down on our end. But first of all, like thanks for the amazing questions.
Yeah, thanks. Really great questions.
Yeah,
challenging.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We've had upwards of almost 30 people online at certain points. Like it's really generous you to spend your time. There's people on Twitter. We don't even know who else is just sort of hanging out there. I don't know. Katie, thank you. It's been hanging out with you today.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Getting their way over there.
You guys know in the course. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and hope you're enjoying the course. And hope you're getting inspired to see with new eyes as you continue the course.
And this is all going to be online soon. The what's it called? The recording of this class.
Yeah.
It's office hours, right?
Great.
All right.
All right.
Enjoy your afternoons or evenings or mornings, wherever you are.
Bye.
Bye.